In the waning days of the Third Age, when the ships of the Eldar had long departed from the Grey Havens, and the memory of ancient kingdoms grew dim in the minds of men, there came to the house of Círdan the shipwright, a stranger wrapped in storm-grey cloak. The wind from the sea bore with it the scent of rain and something else, a whisper of secrets, buried beneath the stones of Fornos Tirane. Círdan, ancient beyond the counting of mortal years, stood upon the white quays where once the ships of Gil-galad had moored. His eyes, grey as the twilight sea, beheld the approaching figure with neither surprise nor welcome, for he had seen this coming in dreams that sailed upon the night wind. "Mithrandir spoke truly," said the stranger, casting back his hood to reveal features both noble and careworn. "The blood of Isildur runs thin in these latter days, yet it runs still." The shipwright's voice carried the weight of ages as he replied, "Aranian, son of Arantar, last of the blood of Elendel's elder line. Long have you wandered in the wild places, seeking what was lost when Fornost fell to the Witch King's malice." Aranian drew forth from beneath his cloak a blade whose steel caught the dying light of Arnor. Upon its fuller ran letters in the Tengwar script, and though age had darkened the metal, the runes blazed with inner fire. Narsil renewed, not the great sword that Isildur bore, but its sister blade, forged in the same fires of Númenor, and thought lost in the ruin of the North Kingdom. "The dreams have grown stronger," Aranian said, his voice heavy with purpose. "In sleep, I see the halls of Anúminas beneath the waters of Nenuial, and in waking, I feel the pull of stones that remember kingship. The Palantir of Anúminas was not destroyed, as the lore masters believe. It lies yet in the sunken palace, and through its seeing stone, servants of the enemy seek to bend the last remnant of Arnor to their will." Círdan's ancient eyes grew troubled. "Then the seeing stones have not lost their power to corrupt, though Sauron himself has passed into the void. What darkness stirs in the north that would use the blood of kings for its own purpose?" The wind rose then, setting the halyards of the empty ships to singing their mournful songs, and in that music Aranian heard the echo of his answer. Somewhere in the desolate lands that once were fair Arnor, another of his bloodline had found the lost Palantir, and was even now falling under the dominion of powers that sought to raise a new shadow in the north. "I go to Anúminas," Aranian declared. "If there is another heir, I must find them ere they become the enemy's tool. Too long have the children of Elendel dwelt apart. If we are to face this darkness, we must stand together as our fathers did at Dagorlad." Círdan nodded slowly. "Then take with you this counsel. Seek ye the grey company that yet rides in Eriador, for Halbarad's son keeps watch over the ancient ways. And remember, the Palantiri show truth, but not all truth, and the will of the viewer may bend what is seen to purposes unforeseen." As dawn broke grey and cold over the havens, Aranian mounted his horse and rode eastward into the wild. Behind him, Círdan watched until horse and rider vanished into the morning mist, then turned his gaze northward, where, beyond the sight of mortal eyes, the ruined towers of Anúminas caught the first rays of the rising sun. 7 days' hard riding through the lonely lands of Eriador brought Aranian to the shores of Lake Evendim, where the broken stones of Anúminas rose like the bones of giants from waters dark and still. No bird sang in the reeds that grew thick along the shoreline, and the very air seemed heavy with the weight of years and sorrow. Here, in the greatest of the 3 cities of Arnor, had dwelt the high kings in the days of their glory. Here Elendel had held court in halls that rivaled Osgiliath in their splendor, and here his son Isildur had ruled in the north, while Anarion kept watch in the south. Now naught remained but tumbled walls and towers that thrust like broken spears from the dark waters. Yet as Aranian made his camp upon the eastern shore, his keen eyes marked that which would have escaped the notice of lesser men. Smoke, rising thin and grey from the ruins of the palace that had once stood proud upon the lake's heart. Someone lived yet in the drowned halls of kings. When Arnor set behind the misty mountain, and Gillistel rose bright in the darkening sky, Aranian launched the small boat he had found half buried in the lake sand and rowed silently through the reed beds toward the ruin. The water was deeper than it had been in the days of the kings, for the streams that fed Evendim had carved new channels in the long years since Fornost fell, and much of the ancient city lay beneath the waves. The palace itself stood upon a rocky isle, its lower halls flooded, but its upper chambers yet standing open to wind and weather. As Aranian drew his boat up onto the broken steps that had once welcomed the greatest lords of the realm, he heard the sound that chilled his blood, a voice speaking words in the black speech, and from within the halls there came an answering radiance, not the warm light of fire or lamp, but the cold gleam of the Palantiri. Drawing Narsil renewed with steel that sang softly in the night air, Aranian climbed the crumbling stairs toward the light. The great doors of the palace hung broken on their hinges, and through their ruin he passed into halls where tapestries rotted on the walls, and the bones of ancient kings lay scattered by tomb robbers of ages past. In the highest chamber of the central tower, beneath a dome whose stones yet bore the star of Elendil, stood a figure robed in black beside a sphere of crystal that pulsed with malevolent light. The Palantir of Anuminas, greatest of all the seeing stones, save only the master stone of Tol Eressëa, rested upon a pedestal of dark marble, and within its depths swirled visions that spoke of armies gathering and kingdoms falling. The figure turned at Aranian's approach and cast back the hood of her robe to reveal features that bore the unmistakable stamp of the Númenórean king. Her hair was dark as the midnight sea, her skin pale as starlight, and in her eyes burned the light of the Dunedain. Yet that light was tainted now with something else, something that spoke of domination and the lust for power. "Brother," she said, and her voice was sweet as honey poured over steel. "Long have I waited for thee to come to me. I am Nimrodel, daughter of Arasuil, and I have looked long into the stone, and seen the truth that the wise would hide from us." Aranian's heart grew cold within him, for he knew this name from the chronicles kept by the rangers. Nimrodel had been his sister, lost in a great storm while still a child, her body never found. That she lived was joy beyond measure. That she had found the Palantir was doom beyond imagining. "Sister," he said, keeping his sword ready though his heart yearned toward her, "step back from the seeing stone. Its visions are poison, as Denethor learned to his cost. Whatever it has shown thee is lies wrapped in seeming truth." Nimrodel laughed, and the sound echoed strangely in the dome above. "Lies? Nay, brother mine, I have seen the glory that awaits us, the restoration of Arnor under our rule, the gathering of all the scattered Dunedain under our banner. The south has its king in Elisar. Shall the north remain forever masterless? Aragorn is rightful king of all the reunited kingdom," Aranian replied. "We are his subjects, not his rivals." "Aragorn!" Nimrodel spat. "That ranger king who bends the knee to elves and dwarves and makes common cause with halflings. The blood of Isildur runs thin in his veins, diluted by generations of wandering in the wild. But we, brother, we are the true heirs of Elendil, the children of the elder line that never bent the knee to lesser kings." The Palantir pulsed brighter, and in its depths Aranian glimpsed visions of a great army marching under the white tree and 7 stars. But the tree was withered, and the stars were dark, and the banners bore devices he did not recognize. At the army's head rode a figure crowned and terrible, and in that figure's face he saw his sister, as she might become if the stone's corruption claimed her fully. "What master do you serve, Nimrodel?" he asked softly. "For the Palantiri have always had masters, and theirs is not a gentle servitude." Her eyes flashed with anger. "I serve no master save my own will and the glory of our house. The stone shows me truth, that there are powers in the far places of the world that would aid us in our rightful claim, powers that see the wisdom in placing true kings upon the thrones of Middle-earth." But even as she spoke, Aranian saw the shadow that moved behind her eyes, and knew that whatever power had awakened in the years since Sauron's fall had found in his sister a tool ready to hand. The battle for her soul, and for the fate of Arnor, was about to begin. The confrontation in the ruined palace stretched through the watches of the night, brother and sister standing at sword's point, while the cursed Palantir cast its sickly radiance upon the wall, where once the banners of the faithful had hung in glory. Nimrodel spoke long of the visions the stone had shown her, armies of the north marching to reclaim their ancient birthright, the scattered Dúnedain united under her crown, and Arnor rising once more to challenge the supremacy of Gondor. Yet Aranian, who had spent long years in the wild places, learning wisdom from the rangers, and the few elves who yet remained in Middle-earth, perceived the subtle poison that laced each vision. The armies he saw in the crystal depths bore arms and armor that belonged to no forge of men, and the banners that flew above them were not the white tree and 7 stars of Elendil, but devices older and more terrible, the lidless eye and the iron crown of Morgoth himself. "Sister," he pleaded, as dawn's light began to creep through the shattered dome above, "set down the stone and come away with me. We will ride to Minas Tirith and lay your claim before King Elisar. He is just and wise. He will hear your words and judge them fairly." Nimrodel's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Elisar, that usurper who claims dominion over lands his feet have never trod? Nay, brother, the time for begging favors from southern kings is past. The stone has shown me allies who remember the old ways, who understand that power belongs to those with the will to seize it." She gestured toward the Palantir, and in its depths new visions swirled, ships with black sails approaching from the uttermost east, bearing warriors whose faces were hidden behind masks of steel. In the far north, beyond even the gray mountains, ancient fortresses stirred to life, as their long-sleeping masters awakened to the call of their long-lost allies. The servants of the shadow were defeated, Aranian said, though his heart grew cold at what he saw, but the shadow itself was not destroyed. "You treat with enemies of all free peoples, sister. Turn back, ere it be too late." But Nimrodel was beyond his reaching now. The Palantir had claimed her as surely as it had claimed Saruman and Denethor before her, and in her eyes burned the light of madness, wedded to purpose. "Go then, brother, if you lack the stomach for greatness. But know that when the armies of the north march south, you shall not be forgotten. Join me, and rule beside me as a king. Stand against me, and share the fate of all who oppose the restoration of Arnor." With that, she spoke a word in the black speech, and the stone flared with such brilliance that Aranian was forced to shield his eyes. When the light faded, she was gone, and with her the accursed Palantir. Only scorched stone remained to mark where they had stood, and in the air hung the acrid smell of sorcery. Aranian stood alone in the ruined hall as the sun rose over Evendim, his heart heavy with the knowledge of what was to come. His sister lived, but she was lost to the darkness, and through her, the enemy, whatever form it now took in the world, had found a way to strike at the very heart of the reunited kingdom. He made his way down to his boat as swiftly as might be, for already he could hear in the distance the sound of hoofbeats, many horses riding hard from the south. As he pushed off from the ruined steps, he saw them, a company of rangers led by a man whose gray cloak bore the silver brooch of the chieftains of the north. This could be none other than Haldir, son of Halbarad, who had taken up his father's role as leader of those Dúnedain who still kept the watch in Eriador. "Aranion!" Haldir called as his company rode down to the water's edge. We felt the trembling of the earth and saw the dark light that blazed from Anúminas. What evil stirs in the drowned halls of kings? Swiftly, Aranian told them all that had passed, and of the Palantir that had been found and lost again. The rangers listened in grim silence, for they knew well the tales of the Seeing Stones and the corruption they could work upon the minds of mortals. "This is beyond our strength to remedy alone," Haldir said when the tale was done. "Word must be sent to King Elisar with all speed, and to the wise in Rivendell as well, if any yet remain in that house of memory. Meanwhile, we must gather such of the Dunedain as can be found, and watch the road. For if your sister speaks true, armies will soon be marching that have not walked Middle-earth since the elder days. What of the eastern ships? Asked one of the rangers. If servants of the enemy come from beyond the Sea of Rhûn, they may strike at the havens ere any can gainsay them. Haldir's face was grim as a winter stone. Then we ride first to the Grey Havens, to bear warning to Círdan if he yet dwells there, and to Mithlond's guardians. After that, south to Rivendell, and then to Minas Tirith. The scattered children of the north must gather as they have not done since the fall of Fornos, for the kingdom itself stands in peril. As they prepared to ride, Aranion looked back once more at the ruins of Annúminas, where the morning light fell golden on stones that remembered glory. Somewhere in the wide world, his sister was gathering her dark allies and preparing for war. The game was set, the pieces moving, and upon its outcome hung the fate not only of Arnor, but of all the free peoples of Middle-earth. The company rode hard westward, carrying word of doom to those who must prepare for the last great war of the Third Age. The last homely house stood as fair as ever in its hidden valley, though fewer lights gleamed in its windows, and silence lay heavy in halls that once rang with song and laughter. Lord Elrond had departed long ago upon the White Ship, but his sons remained, keeping watch over the ancient lore, the few folk who yet sought refuge in Rivendell's protected borders. Elladan and Elrohir received Aranion and the Rangers in the Hall of Fire, where the autumn evening cast dancing shadows upon the walls carved with the histories of the elder days. Here, in chambers that had witnessed the forging of the Alliance and the planning of the last battle, the sons of Elrond listened to the tale of the lost Palantir with faces grave as winter stone. "Dark tidings indeed," said Elladan, when Aranion's tale was done. "We have felt stirrings in the far places, dreams troubled by visions of malice, and the very stones of the valley whisper of ancient evils awakening. The Nazgûl are destroyed, and their master with them, yet still the shadow reaches out from corners of the world, where his servants yet keep their vigil." Elrohir rose and walked to the great window that looked out over the valley. "Long have we dwelt here in the peace that our fathers' victory bought. But peace was never meant to be eternal. The Seeing Stones were made for good purpose in the beginning, to bind the realm of Elendil together in kinship and counsel. That they have become tools of corruption speaks to a deeper malice than we yet understand." "What counsel do you give?" asked Haldir. "King Elisar has been sent word by the swiftest of our riders, but it will be days before any aid can come from Gondor. And if these eastern armies move as swiftly as the Palantir promised, they may strike before the king can gather his strength." The sons of Elrond exchanged glances that spoke of long consultation, in the manner of their kind. At length Elladan spoke. "There is lore in our libraries that speaks of the making of the Palantiri and their first master. If we are to understand what manner of power now wields them, we must delve deep into records that have long lain unopened." "And what of the immediate peril?" Aranion pressed. "My sister gathers her forces even now, and each day's delay strengthens her hand." "For that," said Elrohir, "we counsel patience wedded to preparation. Send word to all the scattered houses of the Dunedain, not only those of the north, but those who settled in distant lands after the fall of the kingdom. If Nimrodel would raise the banner of Arnor, let her face all the true heirs of Elendil united against her claim." Through the night that followed, the sons of Elrond searched their father's archives while the rangers kept watch, and Aranion paced the halls like a caged wolf. In the hour before dawn, Elladan emerged from the deep vaults bearing a scroll of great age, its parchment yellow with years, but its words still clear in the flowing script of the elves. "Here is recorded the making of the Palantiri in the Isle of Númenor," he said, unrolling the ancient document upon the great table in the Hall of Fire. 7 stones were wrought by the craft of the Eldar, each attuned to its brothers, and all answering to the master stone that was kept in Tol Eressëa. But listen to this. There were other stones made in those days, lesser crystals that served as guardians and protectors of the seven. He pointed to a passage written in the Tengwar script. The guardian stones were placed in the care of the most trusted servants of the kings, to watch for signs of corruption in the great Palantiri, and to sound warning if their vision was turned to evil purpose. 3 were made, one for Arnor, one for Gondor, and one kept in Numenor itself. "Then the stone of Numenor is lost beneath the waves," said Haldir. "What of the others?" "The guardian stone of Gondor was kept in Osgiliath until the city fell to the corsairs," Elrohir replied. "It was thought destroyed when the great bridge broke, but perhaps it too survived and was carried away by the waters. As for the guardian stone of Arnor," he paused, consulting another scroll. "It was kept in Fornost until the Witch King's assault, and when the city fell, it was taken north by the last defender and hidden in the cold fells." Iranian's heart leaped with sudden hope. A stone that could counter the Palantir's influence? If it yet exists, we must find it. With such a weapon, we might yet turn Nimrodel from her dark path. "Perhaps," said Eladan cautiously. "But the guardian stones were not made to dominate the Palantiri, only to observe them. What power they might have against a stone already corrupted by dark will, none can say." "Yet we must try," declared Haldir. "Send word to the king that we ride north to the Coldfells. If this guardian stone can be found, it may tip the balance when the armies gather." As the sun rose over the misty mountains, a new urgency filled the company. They would ride north with all speed, seeking in the wild lands beyond Fornost the weapon that might yet save Arnor from its own lost daughter. Behind them, in the halls of Rivendell, the sons of Elrond kept vigil, watching for signs of the eastern armies and preparing for the war that was surely coming. The hunt for the guardian stone had begun. The Coldfells stretched bleak and barren beneath a sky the color of old iron, their rolling heights crowned with the ruins of ancient watchtowers and signal beacons that once had warned of the Witch King's approach. Here, the last defenders of Fornost had made their stand, and here they had fallen with the banner of Arnor still flying above them. Now, only the wind moved among the tumbled stone, and the graves of heroes lay unmarked beneath heather and gorse. Iranian and the Rangers had ridden hard from Rivendell, following the old north road until it dwindled to a hunter's track among the hills. The lore preserved in Elrond's house spoke of a cavern beneath the greatest of the ancient watchtowers, where the last king's men had hidden the treasures they could not carry in their flight. Among those treasures, if the record spoke truly, lay the guardian stone of Arnor. "There," said Haldir, pointing to a broken tower that stood upon the highest ridge, "Amon Aeglos, the hill of the Snowthorn, where King Arvedwi made his last stand before the fall of Fornost. If the guardian stone lies anywhere in these lands, it will be there." They climbed the winding path that led to the tower's base, where blocks of hewn stone lay scattered like the bones of giants. The structure itself had been thrown down by some great force. Whether the malice of the Witch King or merely the weight of years, none could say. Yet among the ruins they found what they sought, a narrow opening that led down into the living rock of the hill. The passage was dark and close, carved by the hands of the Dunedain in the last desperate hours before their kingdom's fall. Their torches cast dancing shadows on walls marked with the 7 stars of Elendil, and the air grew chill as they descended deeper into the earth. At last, they came to a circular chamber hewn from the stone, its walls lined with alcoves that had once held the treasures of Arnor's king. Most of the alcoves were empty now, their contents long since claimed by treasure-seekers or crumbled to dust. But in the centermost niche, upon a pedestal of black marble, stood an orb of crystal, no larger than a man's fist. Unlike the great Palantiri, with their swirling depths and malevolent radiance, this stone was clear as mountain water, and within its heart burned a light soft as starshine. "The guardian stone," breathed Iranian, and as he spoke, the crystal pulsed gently, as if recognizing his voice. "After all these years, it yet keeps its watch. Haldir approached the pedestal with the reverence due to so ancient an artifact. The lore says that only one of the blood of Elendil may command it. If the stone accepts you, Lord Aranian, then perhaps there is hope yet for your sister's redemption. With hands that trembled only slightly, Aranian lifted the guardian stone from its resting place. At his touch it blazed with sudden brilliance, and visions flowed through his mind. Not the dark dreams of conquest and domination that the Palantir had shown to Nimrodel, but images of a different sort. He saw the guardian stone as it had been made in the workshops of Numenor, wrought by elvish skill to serve as a shield against the corruption of the greater stones. He saw its first keeper, a lord of the faithful, who had brought it safely to Middle-earth when the island kingdom fell beneath the waves. He saw it in the hands of the kings of Arnor, watching over the Palantir of Numenus through the long years of peace, and he saw its last keeper, King Arvedui himself, placing it in this hidden vault as the forces of Angmar drew their net tight about Fornos. The king had spoken words over it in the high tongue of Numenor, binding it to the service of his line until the kingdom should be restored or the world itself should end. "What do you see?" asked one of the rangers, for Aranian stood as one entranced, his eyes fixed upon the crystal's depths. "I see my sister," he replied, and his voice was heavy with sorrow. "She stands in a great hall built of black stone, and about her are gathered the captains of her host. The Palantir rests before her on a table of dark wood, and, in its depths, Valar preserve us. She speaks with shadows that have form, but no substance, powers that dwell in the void between the circles of the world." The visions shifted, and now he saw the eastern armies that Nimrodel had summoned. Ships black-sailed upon the Sea of Rune, bearing warriors whose faces were hidden behind masks of steel. From the Grey Mountains came another host, creatures of the deep places that had slept since the elder days, but now woke to the call of their ancient allies. "Where does she gather these forces?" Haldir asked. Aranian peered deeper into the stone, seeking to read the signs that surrounded his sister's dark court. "North of the Grey Mountain, in valleys that knew no sun even in the elder days, there stands a fortress of black stone, raised by powers I dare not name. She has made it her stronghold, and there prepares for war. Can the guardian stone reach her? Can it break the Palantir's hold upon her mind?" "I know not," Aranian admitted, "but there may be a way. The guardian stones were made to observe and to warn, but they have another power as well. They can speak across great distances to one who bears their blood and knows their secret names. If I can reach her with words rather than force, perhaps the sister I knew still lives beneath the darkness that has claimed her." As they prepared to leave the hidden chamber, taking with them the greatest treasure that had survived Arnor's fall, none of them noticed the shadow that moved among the ruins above. A creature of the wild had watched their coming and their going, and now it spread dark wings and flew northward with news that would reach unfriendly ears before the sun set. The guardian stone was found, but their enemies now knew of its discovery. The race to save Nimrodel, and through her, all of Middle-earth, had begun in earnest. Word flew on swift wings to every corner of Eriador as autumn deepened toward winter. From the Tower Hills to the Weather Hills, from the borders of the Shire to the ruins of Tharbad, the rangers spread the call that had not been heard since the fall of Fornos. The Dunedain must gather, for war came to the north. Not since Arvedui's day had so many of the scattered people answered such a summons, yet still they came, grim men in grey cloaks, who had kept faith with their fallen kings through all the long years of exile. In Rivendell, the sons of Elrond received messengers from many lands. From Dale came word that King Bard had seen the black ships upon the Sea of Rune and was marshalling his archers. The Beornings sent promise of aid, as did the woodmen of Wilderland and even some few of the elves of Lorien. Most heartening of all was the message that rode from Minas Tirith. King Elisar himself would come north with the full strength of Gondor's restored armies. Yet for all these preparations, time was not their ally. The Guardian Stone showed Aranian visions of his sister's growing power. The eastern hosts had landed at the mouths of the Carnon and were marching westward through Wilderland, while from the Grey Mountains came creatures that had not walked under the open sky since the First Age. At their head rode Nimrodel herself, crowned now with a circlet of black steel, and bearing a sword whose blade burned with unnatural fire. "She has perhaps a month's march to the borders of Eriador," Haldir said, as the rangers gathered in council at Rivendell. "After that, she can strike at any target she chooses, Bree, the Shire, or even Rivendell itself." "The Palantir shows her our movement," Aranian replied grimly. "Every plan we make, every force we deploy, she sees through the cursed stone. We cannot surprise her, and she knows our strength to the last sword." Elladan looked up from the maps spread upon the great table. "Yet the Guardian Stone may serve as more than a window into her plans. The lore speaks of a ritual, performed when a Palantir falls under dark dominion. If one of the true blood holds a Guardian Stone and speaks the words of binding in the presence of the corrupted Palantir, its visions may be turned to truth rather than deception." "Meaning what, precisely?" asked one of the rangers. "Meaning that the holder of the Guardian Stone could see through the Palantir's lies and perhaps even wrest control of it from its current master," Elrohir explained. "But the ritual is perilous beyond measure. If it fails, both stones are destroyed, and the one who attempts it." He did not finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. Aranian hefted the Guardian Stone, feeling its weight both physical and spiritual. "Then I must reach my sister and attempt this ritual. If the Palantir can be cleansed of its corruption, she may yet be saved. And if not," said Haldir quietly, "then you will die, and the North will be left without its rightful heir at the very moment when strong leadership is most needed." "I am not the rightful heir of anything," Aranian protested. "King Elisar rules by ancient right, confirmed in battle and acknowledged by all the free peoples. I seek no crown, save the salvation of my sister's soul." Indeed, the debate might have continued, but it was interrupted by the sound of horns echoing through the valley. From the hidden paths that led to Rivendell came a company such as had not been seen in that peaceful realm for many years. The vanguard of Gondor's army, led by Prince Eldarion himself, eldest son of King Elisar. The prince was a man grown, tall and dark-haired after the fashion of his house, but with the grey eyes of the rangers and the star of Elendel upon his brow. Behind him rode the Knights of the White Tree, their armor bright as silver in the autumn sun, and after them came rank upon rank of Gondor's finest warriors. "My father sends his greetings to the lords of Rivendell," Eldarion said as he dismounted in the courtyard, "and his promise that the full strength of the reunited kingdom stands ready to face whatever darkness threatens the north." "Your aid is welcome beyond measure," Elladan replied. "Yet I fear the enemy may strike before your father's full strength can be brought to bear. Then we must hold them as we can," the prince said simply. "Where does the greatest danger lie?" Aranian stepped forward, the Guardian Stone glowing softly in his hand. "My lord prince, I must reach my sister ere she strikes at the heart of the realm. If this stone can break the Palantir's hold upon her, the war may end before it truly begins." Eldarion studied him with eyes that held something of his father's wisdom. "You speak of entering the enemy's very stronghold to face a foe who commands sorcery beyond our understanding. Is there no other way?" "If there is, I have not found it," Aranian replied. "The Guardian Stone will not serve any but one of Elendel's blood, and among all the Dunedain, only I have stood before my sister and seen the light of kinship yet burning in her eyes, however dimly." The prince was silent for a long moment, weighing the counsel of strategy against the demands of honor. At last, he nodded. "Then you shall have what aid we can give. A company of our swiftest riders will bear you north, and if you can indeed turn your sister from her dark path, we will be ready to welcome her back into the light." As the sun set behind the misty mountains, the War Council of the Free Peoples laid their final plan. The armies would march north with all speed, while Aranian and a chosen few would ride ahead to attempt the perilous ritual that might yet save Middle-earth from another age of shadow. The last great gamble of the North Kingdom was about to begin. Beyond the Grey Mountain, where even the hardiest hunters of the Bjornings feared to tread, stood a fortress that had no name in the tongues of the free people. Built in the elder days by powers that served the shadow, its black walls rose from a valley that knew neither sun nor star, shrouded always in mists that reeked of malice and ancient sorcery. Here Nimrodel had made her seat of power. Drawn by visions the Palantir had shown her of weapons and allies hidden in the deep places of the world. The fortress had slept for long ages after its masters fell in the War of Wrath. But at her coming its halls had stirred to life once more, and creatures of darkness crept forth from the deep places to serve the new mistress who bore the blood of kings. Arenian and his companions had ridden hard through the wild lands, following paths known only to the rangers and the few hunters brave enough to venture into those accursed regions. With him rode Haldir and 6 of the Dunedain, chosen for their skill at woodcraft and their steadiness in the face of terror. Prince Eldarion had wished to come as well, but Arenian had counseled against it. If the ritual failed, and he perished, the prince must live to lead the armies against whatever evil emerged from the north. As they drew near to the dark valley, the very air seemed to thicken about them, and their horses began to refuse the path. Strange sounds echoed from the mountainsides, not the cries of any beast that walked Middle-earth, but the voices of things that should have remained in the void between the worlds. "We go afoot from here," Arenian said, dismounting at the edge of a pine wood that marked the last of the wholesome land. The guardian stone grows heavier with each step, as if it fights against the presence of its corrupted brother. They left their horses with one of the rangers, who would wait 3 days for their return before riding south with news of their fate. Then, with weapons ready, and the guardian stone casting its gentle radiance to ward off the shadows that pressed close about them, they began the descent into the Valley of Darkness. The path wound between standing stones carved with runes that hurt the eyes to look upon, and the mist grew thicker as they descended. Strange phosphorescent lights danced among the rocks, and more than once they heard the sound of wings overhead. Great wings that belonged to no bird or bat, but to creatures that had flown in the darkness above Angband in the years before the sun. At last, they came to the gates of the fortress, wrought of black iron, and set with gems that blazed with their own inner fire. No guards stood watch upon the walls, for the mistress of that place trusted in older defenses than steel and spear. The gates stood open, as if in mockery or invitation, and beyond them stretched a courtyard paved with stones that reflected no light. "It is a trap," whispered Haldir. "She knows we come." "Of course she knows," Arenian replied. "The Palantir shows her all our movement, but the trap is baited with what we must have, my sister herself, and the stone that holds her thrall." They entered the courtyard with weapons drawn, expecting at any moment to hear the clash of arms and the war cries of enemies. Yet no foe appeared, and no sound broke the oppressive silence, save the echo of their own footsteps on the dark stone. The fortress seemed empty as a tomb, but it was the emptiness of the spider's web, patient and predatory. The great doors of the central keep stood ajar, and through them came a faint radiance. Not the clean light of torch or lamp, but the sickly glow of the Palantir. Following that baleful beacon, they climbed a spiral stair that wound upward through halls lined with tapestries that depicted scenes of ancient wars and the triumph of darkness over light. At the stair's summit lay a great chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow, and its walls adorned with weapons and armor that had served the enemy in ages past. At the chamber's heart stood a dais of black marble, and upon it a throne carved from a single block of obsidian. In that throne sat Nimrodel, crowned and terrible, and before her on a pedestal of dark metal rested the Palantir of Anuminas. She had changed much since their meeting in the ruined palace. Her face was pale as winter frost, and her eyes burned with a light that was not wholly her own. The black crown upon her brow was set with 7 stones that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, and the sword across her knees was the blade de Gorlonst, the battle swift, which had been lost when Fornost fell and was thought destroyed. "Welcome, brother mine," she said, and her voice echoed strangely in the vast chamber. "I have been expecting you. Did you think to creep upon me unawares, like a thief in the night? The Palantir shows me all things, your journey through the wild, your gathering of the rangers, even the guardian stone that burns so brightly in your hand." Aranian stepped forward, feeling the weight of destiny upon his shoulders. Around him, the rangers fanned out, their swords bright in the stone's radiance, but he knew that steel alone would not win this battle. "Sister," he said, raising the guardian stone so that its light fell full upon her face, "I have come to bring you home. The Palantir has poisoned your mind with visions of false glory, but there is still time to step back from the brink. Come with me, and we will face King Elisar together. He is just and merciful. He will forgive what has been done if you renounce the darkness now." Nimrodel laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Forgive? What have I done that needs forgiveness? I have reclaimed our birthright, gathered armies to restore the glory of Arnor, awakened powers that will see our enemies driven from the field. You speak of coming home, brother, but this is my home now, and these are my people." As she spoke, figures began to emerge from the shadows at the chamber's edges. They had the shape of men, but their armor was black as midnight, and their faces were hidden behind masks of steel. These were the Eastern warriors she had summoned, the servants of powers that had fled into the uttermost east when Sauron fell. "You see how they honor me," Nimrodel continued. "They who served the Master of the Nine acknowledge me as their rightful queen. What has Elisar ever offered you but exile and obscurity? Join me, brother, and we shall rule as kings of old, with power over life and death." But Aranian was already beginning the ritual that Elrond's sons had taught him, speaking words in the high tongue of Numenor, while the guardian stone blazed brighter in his hands. The Palantir responded to the challenge, its own radiance growing fierce and terrible, and between the two stones there began a battle of wills that shook the very foundations of the fortress. The final confrontation had begun, and upon its outcome hung the fate of all the North. The ritual of cleansing was older than the kingdoms of Middle-earth, wrought in the depths of time when the Eldar first learned to bind light and thought within crystal. As Aranian spoke the words of power, the guardian stone in his hands blazed like a captured star, and its radiance pushed back the shadows that had long haunted the dark fortress. Yet the Palantir of Annúminas was no weak thing to be easily mastered. Fed by years of corruption and strengthened by the will of its current mistress, it fought against the guardian stone's influence with a fury that shook the black wall and cracked the obsidian throne where Nimrodel sat. The air between the two stones shimmered with power, and strange colors played across the chamber, hues that had no names in mortal tongues. "You cannot break what I have built," Nimrodel snarled, her hands pressed flat against the Palantir's surface. "The stone serves me now, shows me visions of glory that your little crystal cannot match. Behold." The Palantir flared with malevolent light, and visions flooded the chamber. Not mere images in crystal depths, but phantom shapes that moved through the air like memories given form. Aranian saw armies beyond counting marching under the banner of the Iron Crown, saw the towers of Minas Tirith burning, while black ships sailed up Anduin, saw a world where the shadow had never been defeated, and darkness reigned eternal. But the Guardian Stone answered with visions of its own, the white tree blooming in the courts of the kings, the ships of the faithful sailing from Numenor's ruin, the light of Gilistel rising over Middle-earth in the hour of greatest need. Truth warred with deception, hope battled despair, and the very stones of the fortress groaned under the strain. "Look closer, sister," Aranian gasped, pouring all his will into the Guardian Stone. "See what lies behind your glorious visions. The armies you command, what are they truly?" The battle between the stones reached its crescendo, and for a moment the Palantir's visions wavered. Through the cracks in its deceptions, Nimrodel glimpsed the truth. Her eastern warriors were not living men, but wraiths, bound to service by ancient necromancy. Her armies of the north were creatures of shadow and malice that would devour all life if given free rein, and the powers that had promised her dominion over Middle-earth cared nothing for her, save as a tool to be used and discarded. "No," she whispered, her hands shaking as the full horror of her bargain became clear. "They promised. They said I would be queen. They said Arnor would rise again." "Arnor will rise again," Aranian said, stepping closer despite the pain that lanced through his head from the warring stones. "But not like this. Not through darkness and corruption. Come back to me, Nimrodel. You are my sister, daughter of kings, heir to the faithful. This is not your path." For a moment, it seemed as though she might hear him. The light in her eyes flickered, and her grip upon the palantir loosened. The guardian stone's radiance reached out like a gentle hand, offering redemption and the chance to turn back from the precipice. But then another voice spoke, not aloud, but directly into the minds of all present. A voice like the whisper of wind through tombstones and the distant echo of malice. "She is mine now, son of Isildur. The blood of Numenor runs in her veins, but it is tainted blood, proud blood that yearns for dominion. She chose this path freely when she took up the stone, and freely she will serve until the world's ending." The presence that spoke was ancient beyond measure, older than Sauron, older perhaps than the foundations of Arda itself. It was one of the nameless things that dwelt in the void before the music, and when the world was made, it had hidden in the deep places, nursing its hatred and waiting for a chance to return. "I know you," Aranian said, though speaking cost him dearly as the Battle of the Stones reached new heights of fury. "You are one of the unbegotten, the things that should not be. You have no power here save what mortals give you willingly, and she has given me much," the voice replied, and Nimrodl's form began to change, her features growing harsh and terrible as the presence within her grew stronger. "Through her, I shall remake this world as it should have been, a realm of eternal night, where the children of Ilúvatar serve their betters in darkness and despair." The eastern warriors began to advance, their steel boots ringing on the stone floor, but the rangers met them with courage undaunted. Steel rang on steel in the shadow of the warring stone, and though the wraiths were terrible foes, the Dunedain had fought such creatures before and knew their weaknesses. Yet the true battle was between Aranian and the thing that wore his sister's face. The guardian stone blazed like the light of Arendil, driving back the shadows, but the Palantir answered with visions of such horror that mortal minds could scarce encompass them. The struggle was not merely of stone against stone, but of will against will, hope against despair, the light of the west against the darkness of the void. "Release her," Aranian commanded, though blood ran from his eyes and nose from the strain. "She is not yours to claim. The children of Ilúvatar belong to themselves alone." "She chose!" the presence shrieked. She looked into the stone of her own will, sought power for her own glory. "I merely gave her what she desired most, and now she is bound to me until the ending of all things." But even as it spoke, Aranian saw the flaw in its words. Choice. That was the key. Nimrodl had chosen to look into the Palantir, but she had been deceived about the nature of her choice. If she could choose again, freely and with full knowledge, the bonds that held her might yet be broken. Drawing upon reserves of strength he had not known he possessed, Aranian began the final phase of the ritual, not the cleansing of the corrupted stone, but the offering of true choice to the one who had been ensnared by its lies. "Sister!" he called out, his voice somehow carrying over the din of battle and the howling of frustrated malice. "You have seen the truth now. Choose again. Choose freely, with all the knowledge of what your path has led to. Will you serve the darkness, or will you come home?" The moment of choice had come, and upon it hung not only the fate of Nimrodl's soul, but the future of all Middle-earth. In the chamber of black stone, where ancient malice warred with the light of the faithful, time seemed to hang suspended, like a drop of water about to fall. Nimrodl stood frozen between the two stones, her face a mask of anguish, as the presence within her fought against the pull of the Guardian Stone's radiance. About them the battle raged between rangers and wraiths, but that seemed distant and small beside the greater struggle for a soul. "Choose, daughter of kings," Aranian pleaded, though the effort of maintaining the ritual was draining his strength like wine poured from a broken cup. "You have seen what your bargain has brought, death and corruption following in your wake, but it is not too late. The light still burns within you, however dimly. You need only reach for it." Dor, the nameless thing that had claimed her, shrieked its fury, pouring visions of power and dominion into her mind. Herself crowned as queen of all Middle-earth, the Dunedain restored to glory, the enemies of Arnor crushed beneath her heel. Yet now these visions seemed hollow and cold, for she had seen behind their fair faces and beheld the truth that she would be no queen, but merely a puppet, dancing to the will of something that despised all life. I thought I was saving our people," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the clash of battle. "The stone showed me Arnor reborn, our scattered kindred gathered under one banner. How was I to know it lied? Because that is what the stones do to those who would use them for selfish ends," Aranian replied. "Saruman learned this truth too late, as did Denethor. The Palantiri were made to serve, not to rule, and when mortals seek to be their masters, they become their slave instead." Around the dais, the battle was turning against the Rangers. Though they fought with the courage of their forefathers, the Eastern Wraiths were numerous and skilled, and their weapons bore enchantments that made them fearsome foes. Haldir bled from a dozen wounds, and 2 of his companions had already fallen. Yet still they held their ground, buying time for the greater battle to reach its conclusion. The Palantir sensed its hold weakening and redoubled its assault upon Nimrodal's will. Dark visions flooded her mind, images of her brother's death, of the Rangers' defeat, of King Elisar's armies broken on the fields of war. "See how your mercy rewards you," the nameless thing whispered. "Cast aside these weakling thoughts, and embrace the power that is yours by right. Together, we shall build an empire that will endure until the ending of the world." But Nimrodal had seen enough of the thing's promises to know their worth. With an effort that seemed to tear her very soul, she wrenched her hands away from the Palantir's surface. The stone's light flickered and dimmed, its visions becoming confused and contradictory as it lost its grip upon her will. "I choose the light," she gasped, reaching toward her brother with hands that shook like leaves in winter wind. "I choose redemption." The moment her fingers touched the Guardian Stone, the chamber exploded with radiance that burned away shadow and made the very stones cry out in anguish. The Palantir of Anúminas, deprived of its willing vessel and assaulted by the clean light of Númenor, cracked along its surface with a sound like breaking thunder. The nameless thing within it shrieked once in fury and despair, then fled back to whatever dark realm had spawned it, leaving behind only the echo of its malice. Yet, the Palantir's destruction came at a cost. The backlash of its breaking sent shockwaves through the fortress, bringing down great blocks of stone and opening chasms in the floor. The Eastern Wraiths, their anchor to the mortal world severed, began to fade like mist before the dawn, their forms growing ever more insubstantial until they vanished entirely. "The fortress falls!" Haldir shouted over the growing din of collapse. "We must away, or be buried beneath these accursed stones." Aranian caught his sister as she collapsed, her strength spent by the effort of breaking free from the Palantir's hold. She was pale as parchment and light as a child in his arms, but her eyes were clear for the first time since he had found her in the ruins of Anúminas. "Brother," she whispered as he lifted her, "forgive me. I thought I was strong enough to master it. I was wrong." "There is nothing to forgive," he replied, though his own strength was nearly spent. "You chose the light in the end, and that is what matters. Now we must flee this place, ere it becomes our tomb." They ran through corridors that shook and buckled, past halls where ancient weapons fell from their wall mounts, and statues of forgotten tyrants cracked and toppled. Behind them, the central tower swayed like a tree in a gale, its foundations undermined by the Palantir's destruction. The very earth seemed eager to swallow the fortress that had stood as an affront to the natural order for so many ages. They burst from the gates just as the tower collapsed entirely, bringing down much of the surrounding walls in a thunder of falling stone. Where the dark fortress had stood, now there was only a great pile of rubble, and already the mists that had shrouded the valley were beginning to dissipate as wholesome winds swept down from the mountain. "It is finished," Nimrodel said, as they stood catching their breath in the clean air beyond the ruin. "The stone is broken, the armies are scattered, and the thing that used me as its vessel has fled back to the darkness. What remains now but to face the judgment of our deeds?" Aranian looked upon his sister with eyes full of love and sorrow. "Now we go home," he said simply. "King Elisar awaits, and he is merciful to those who truly repent. You have paid a great price for your redemption. Let that be enough." As they began the long journey south, neither saw the shadow that detached itself from the ruins behind them, a fragment of the nameless thing's malice that had escaped the general destruction, nursing its hatred and planning new mischief. The immediate danger was past, but in the deep places of the world, evil never truly dies. It only waits for another chance to poison the hearts of mortals. The first victory was won, but the war for Middle-earth was far from over. The court of King Elisar had seen many strange sights in the years since the War of the Ring, but few stranger than the company that rode through the gates of Minas Tirith on a grey morning in late autumn. At their head rode Aranian, son of Arantar, bearing the shattered fragments of the Palantir of Anuminas in a casket of iron and lead. Beside him rode his sister Nimrodel, no longer crowned with black steel, but wearing simple grey robes that marked her as a penitent seeking judgment. Behind them came the rangers who had survived the assault on the dark fortress, their number sadly diminished, but their honor unstained. They bore the banners of Arnor, not the corrupted devices that had flown over Nimrodel's armies, but the true emblems of Elendel's house, the white tree and 7 stars that had guided the faithful through their darkest hours. King Elisar received them in the Hall of Kings, beneath the great dome where the white tree bloomed eternal in its court of stone. He was older now than when he had first taken the crown, his dark hair touched with silver, and his face lined with the cares of kingship, yet his grey eyes still held the wisdom and compassion that had made him beloved of all free people. "Aranian of the northern Dunedain," the king said as the company knelt before the throne, "you have done a great service to the realm, though the cost has been heavy. Rise, and tell us what passed in the dark places beyond the mountains." Aranian rose and spoke the tale in full, of the finding of his sister, the corruption of the Palantir, the dark fortress and the thing that had dwelt within it. He spoke without shame of Nimrodel's choices, but also without condemnation, letting the facts speak for themselves. When he was done, the hall lay in silence, broken only by the whisper of wind through the white tree's branches. The king turned his gaze upon Nimrodel, who had remained kneeling throughout her brother's recitation. "Lady Nimrodel, daughter of Arasul, what say you to these charges? You have raised armies against the peace of the realm, treated with enemies of all free peoples, and wielded sorcery that brought terror to many lands. Yet your brother speaks also of your repentance. Which is the truth of you, the would-be conqueror, or the penitent who seeks forgiveness?" Nimrodel raised her head, and those who looked upon her saw that her face bore the marks of great suffering. "My lord king," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious distress, "I will not seek to excuse what I have done. I looked into the Palantir with pride in my heart and ambition in my thoughts, and I paid the price for my folly. That I was deceived makes the harm I caused no less real, nor the lives lost in my service any less precious." "How?" She drew from her robes a circlet of silver set with 7 stars, not the black crown she had worn in the dark fortress, but the ancient diadem of Fornost, last crown of the northern kingdom. "I return to you this symbol of authority that was never rightfully mine to claim. Let it rest in your treasury with the other relics of Arnor, for that kingdom is ended, and you alone our king in the north. King Elisar studied the crown with eyes that seemed to see beyond the present moment into the deep currents of history. "The kingdom of Arnor is not ended," he said at last, his words carrying clearly through the great hall. "It lives on in every ranger who keeps the watch, in every village that knows peace because brave men guard its borders, in every child who grows up free because their forefathers chose light over darkness." He rose from his throne and descended the steps to where Nimrodel knelt. "You have sinned greatly, lady, but you have also suffered greatly for your sins. In you, the blood of Isildur runs true, despite the darkness that once claimed your heart. I will not see that blood spilled in retribution, nor will I exile you to wander masterless in the wild." The king's judgment, when it came, surprised all who heard it. Nimrodel was stripped of all titles and honors she had claimed, but she was granted a place among the rangers, as a guardian of the peace she had threatened. Under Haldir's guidance, she would learn to serve rather than command, to protect rather than conquer, and through such service to redeem the harm she had caused. "You will find the way hard," the king warned her. "The ranger's life is one of sacrifice and thankless duty, with no reward save the knowledge that others sleep safely because of your vigilance. Yet I think it may heal what sorcery has wounded, if you have the strength to endure it." Nimrodel bowed her head in acceptance. "I ask for nothing more than the chance to atone, my lord. If I can save one life to balance each that was lost through my folly, perhaps in time I may find peace." As for Iranian, the king offered him high honor and a place at court, but he declined with courtesy. "My road lies in the wild places still," he said. "There are others of our scattered people who may yet be found, and ancient threats that may yet stir. Let me serve as my fathers did, keeping watch on the borders of the known world." The king nodded with understanding, for he too had walked the ranger's path and knew its call. Yet he pressed into Iranian's hands a gift that surprised all present, a ring of gold set with a green stone, bearing the device of the reunited kingdom. "This is not a reward for service," the king explained, "but a trust for the future. Should the need arise, should the realm face peril too great for armies to withstand, let this ring be a token that the bearer speaks with my voice and commands with my authority. The blood of Isildur has proven itself true in this crisis. Let it be ready to do so again if darkness returns to Middle-earth." As the ceremony concluded and the company prepared to depart, none in that hall could foresee how prophetic the king's words would prove. In the deep places of the world, the fragment of the nameless thing that had escaped the fortress's destruction was already at work, seeking new vessels for its malice and new ways to strike at the children of light. The palantir of Anuminus was destroyed, but other stones remained, and other hearts might yet be turned to darkness. The victory in the north was complete, but it was only the first battle in a war that would test the courage of heroes yet unborn. 3 years passed in peace after the breaking of the palantir, years in which Nimrodel walked the ranger's path with grim determination, and Iranian kept watch on the borders of the known world. The scattered armies that had served the dark fortress melted away like mist before the dawn, their supernatural bonds broken by their mistress's redemption. It seemed that the threat from the north was ended, and the realm could turn its attention to the gentler tasks of healing and rebuilding. Yet, in the deep places beneath the misty mountain, where even the light of Gilistel could not penetrate, something stirred in chambers that had lain empty since the fall of Moria. The fragment of the nameless thing that had escaped destruction had found a new host, not in any creature of flesh and blood, but in the very stones themselves, awakening echoes of the ancient malice that had once dwelt in those halls. The first sign of renewed danger came from an unexpected source, the Shire itself, where halflings had lived in peace for countless generations. Strange dreams began to trouble the sleep of the more sensitive among them, visions of dark waters rising to drown their green fields, of shadows walking where no shadow should fall, of voices calling from beneath the earth with promises of power beyond imagining. Samwise Gamgee, now mayor of the Shire and keeper of its peace, sent word to the Rangers when the dreams grew too vivid to ignore. "There's somewhat wrong in the deep places," his letter said in its careful script. "The gaffer's ghost came to me in sleep, warning of old evils stirring, begging your pardon, but we'd take it kindly if someone could come and have a look." The message reached Iranian as he kept watch in the Weather Hills, and within hours he was riding hard for Bag End. What he found there chilled his blood. Not merely troubled dreams, but clear evidence that something was actively seeking to influence the hobbit's mind. The very earth around certain burrows had turned black and barren, and from the affected holes came a smell like old grave and bitter waters. "It began a fortnight past," Sam explained as they surveyed the damage in his own garden. "Young Frodo Baggins, that's my master's cousin's lad. He came running to me with tales of voices under his floor, speaking words he couldn't understand, but that made him feel all queer inside. When I dug down to see what was what, I found this." He held up a shard of black crystal, no larger than his thumb, but pulsing with a faint inner light. Iranian needed no closer examination to know what it was. A fragment of one of the destroyed Palantiri, somehow preserved and imbued with malevolent purpose. "How many of these have been found?" he asked grimly. 7 or 8, scattered around the Shire like seeds in a field," Sam replied. "Each one buried beneath a hole where someone was having the dreams. We've dug them all up now, but the damage is done. The poor folk can't sleep for the visions, and their gardens won't grow proper anymore." Iranian studied the crystal fragment with growing alarm. If the nameless thing could create such artifacts and use them to corrupt minds at a distance, then nowhere in Middle-earth was truly safe from its influence. Worse, the choice of the Shire as a target suggested a cruel intelligence behind the attack. What better way to strike at the hope of the free peoples than to corrupt the very symbol of peace and innocence? "Where is the nearest of these fragments now?" he asked. Sam led him to the ruins of what had once been a cheerful hobbit hole, now blackened and lifeless as a burned-out coal. From the ground nearby came a sound like whispered conversation, though no living thing moved in the corrupted earth. Iranian knelt and pressed his ear to the ground, and immediately recoiled as visions flooded his mind. Vast armies marching beneath banners of flame and shadow, cities burning while their people fled in terror, and over all, a presence vast and hungry that sought to devour light itself. But these were not the random nightmares of a broken Palantir. They were memory, images from the elder days when the first Dark Lord had walked Middle-earth in form and fury. "It seeks to awaken something," he said, rising with a face pale as winter frost. "The crystal fragments are not merely weapons of corruption. They are keys, each one designed to unlock a different seal or ward. Someone, or something, is trying to free powers that were bound long ago." He thought of the ring that King Elisar had given him, and knew that the time had come to use it. This was beyond the strength of Rangers to handle alone. It would require the resources of the entire kingdom, and perhaps allies from distant lands as well. "Send word to all the Shire," he told Sam. "Every hole must be searched, every fragment found and contained, and keep the folk indoors after sunset. There are worse things than dreams walking in the darkness now." As he prepared to ride south with the dread news, Iranian felt the weight of prophecy upon his shoulders. The war that had begun with his sister's corruption was not ended, but only entering a new phase, and this time the enemy would not be content with mere conquest. It sought nothing less than the unmaking of the world itself, the return of the darkness that had reigned before the first dawn. The final battle for Middle-earth was about to begin. The great hall of Minas Tirith had not seen such a gathering since the days of the War of the Ring. From every corner of Middle-earth they came, the lords of Gondor and Rohan, the princes of Dale and Erebor, the Eldar of Rivendell and Lothlorien, and even representatives of the far kingdoms beyond the Sea of Rhûn. At the high table sat King Elisar, his face grave with the weight of the counsel they must take, while before him lay the evidence of the enemy's renewed malice. 7 crystal fragments, each one pulsing with malevolent light. Aranian stood before the assembled lords and told his tale of the corruption in the Shire, the awakening malice beneath the mountains, and the growing signs that something ancient and terrible stirring in the deep places of the world. As he spoke, other reports came in. The dwarves of Erebor had sealed 3 levels of their mines after workers reported hearing voices from below that spoke in the black speech. The elves of Lothlorien had felt disturbances in the music of creation itself, and from the far south came word that the Haradrim were fleeing their ancestral lands as ancient ruins began to glow with unholy fire. "The pattern is clear," said Eladan when all the reports had been heard. "Some power seeks to undo the bindings that our fathers placed upon the servants of darkness. If it succeeds, we face not merely another war, but the potential unmaking of all that has been built since the elder days." King Elisar rose from his throne, his hand resting upon the hilt of Anduril. "Then we must act swiftly, and with all the strength we can muster. The Palantir of Anuminus is destroyed, but there are other seeing stones in the world, including the stone of Orthanc, which remains cleansed of evil influence. Through it, we may yet discover the true nature of our enemy." The stone of Orthanc had been brought to Minas Tirith after Saruman's defeat, kept under careful guard in the deepest vaults of the citadel. Now it was carried up to the high chamber where the council met, its surface dark and still as night-shadowed water. Only King Elisar himself dared to look within its depths, for his will had been proven strong enough to master such artifacts without falling to their corruption. As the king gazed into the Palantir, his face grew pale and drawn, for the visions that came to him were terrible beyond imagining. He saw the truth at last. The fragments found in the Shire and elsewhere were not merely remnants of broken stones, but seeds planted by a consciousness that had learned to exist within crystal itself. The nameless thing had not been destroyed in the fall of the Dark Fortress, but had fragmented itself, spreading its essence across many vessels in a desperate bid for survival. And now those fragments were calling to something far worse. Not the lesser shadows that had served the Dark Lords of old, but their predecessor, the first and greatest of the unbegotten, the thing that had corrupted the music of creation itself in the beginning of days. It slumbered still in the deepest places beneath the roots of the mountains, but each crystal fragment was a key that would weaken the bonds that held it prisoner. "Morgoth himself is not the danger," the king said when he stepped back from the stone, his voice hoarse with strain. "But what came before him, the discord that existed even in the timeless halls, the negation that seeks to unmake all that Eru Iluvatar has created. If enough of these crystal seeds take root, if enough minds are corrupted to its purpose, it may yet find a way to break free from its prison." The silence that followed was deeper than any that had ever fallen in that hall. Even the bravest among them quailed at the thought of facing a power that had challenged the Creator himself in the dawn of time. Yet from that silence came an unexpected voice. Nimrodel stepped forward from where she had stood among the rangers, her face set with grim determination. "My lords," she said, "I know something of how these crystals work, for I bore one of their greater cousins and felt its influence upon my mind. They cannot simply be destroyed by force. That only scatters their essence further. But they can be cleansed if one is willing to pay the price." "What price?" asked the king, though his eyes already held the shadow of knowledge. "The price that all the faithful have paid since the beginning," Nimrodel replied. "To stand against the darkness even unto death, to choose the light, even when it costs everything we hold dear. The crystals feed on selfish desire and personal ambition, but they have no power over one who truly seeks not their own glory, but the good of all." She turned to address the full council, and in her voice was an echo of the nobility that had once made her a target for corruption. "I propose that we gather all the fragments we can find and bring them to a place of power, somewhere that the light of the West still shines strong and clear. There, those of us who bear the blood of the faithful will take up the crystals willingly, not to use their power, but to absorb their malice into ourselves. If we hold fast to the light, Even as the darkness consumes us, the crystals will be cleansed and their threat ended. That is a death sentence, Aranian said, his voice tight with anguish. Sister, you speak of deliberate corruption, of taking poison into your soul, knowing it will destroy you. Perhaps, she replied quietly, but if we do not try, then all Middle-earth falls to shadow, and our deaths will be meaningless. Better to die with purpose than to live as slaves to the unbegotten. King Elisar was silent for a long moment, weighing the desperate plan against the magnitude of the threat they faced. At last he spoke. There is wisdom in your words, Lady Nimrodel, but also great peril. If even one of you falters, if the darkness proves stronger than your will to resist, then all is lost, and the enemy gains not merely victory, but willing servants of royal blood. Then we must not falter, she said simply. The debate that followed lasted through the night and into the next day, as lords and councillors sought alternatives to the desperate gamble Nimrodel proposed. Yet no other plan offered even the hope of success. And with each passing hour, new reports arrived of crystal fragments appearing in distant lands. Time was running short, and the enemy's influence was spreading like a plague across the world. In the end, it was Aranian who spoke the words that settled the matter. My sister speaks truly. This is the path the faithful have always walked, the choice between comfortable compromise and painful sacrifice. If the blood of Numenor is to mean anything in these latter days, let it be spent in service to the light. And so the last alliance of light was forged, not an alliance of armies and weapons, but of hearts and souls willing to face the ultimate darkness. From every corner of Middle-earth came volunteers of the ancient bloodlines, descendants of the Edain, the elf friend, and the star kindred who had chosen Ilúvatar's light over the discord of the void. The place chosen for their sacrifice was Mount Mindolluin itself, where the white tree bloomed eternal, and the light of the west still shone pure and strong. There, on the highest peak, where even the eagles seldom flew, they would make their stand against the darkness, each one taking up a crystal fragment and holding it until either the malice was purged or they themselves were consumed. As the chosen made their preparations and said their farewells, none could know that their sacrifice would be remembered not as a defeat, but as the greatest victory of the Fourth Age. For in choosing to face corruption with purity, despair with hope, and the void's negation with Ilúvatar's affirmation, they would write the final chapter in the long war between light and darkness that had begun in the music of creation itself. The hour of ultimate choice had come, and the children of the West would not be found wanting.